and for the listeners out there, if you want to know more about this reality as a virtual reality and this reality as data and information, I'm not going to derive that here. We're just assuming that you've already, listened to some of the other things that have explained how that comes about. Particularly, if you're new to my work, go to the YouTube site. TWCJR44 is the name of the site. Go to that site and look at the Calgary video, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. Actually, you can do Friday too if you'd like to start with an introduction. So that's a good place to look to find out about the science and the logic behind calling this an information-based virtual reality. So we'll just start here, assuming that you understand that.
Einstein loved Mozart. Here's a person, highly intellectual, but when he played Mozart, he felt that there was some sort of connection on a higher level. If this may be the connection to consciousness that he was looking for, this happened accidentally, but that brought something rich to his life. I have talked to people who are musicians that claim it's a language, it's a way to communicate that's universal. It means a lot to them, and it certainly enriched Einstein's life. Have you read anything about that, or can you comment on that?
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit, and let's throw art in there with music.
All right.
And we'll talk about them in both. Well, music is an art. So we'll talk about art in general then. There's a couple of ways and a couple of reasons why we are affected by art. By visual arts, by acoustic arts, music. One of the fundamental reasons, is that we as information, right? That's what defines us. We're in an information reality. This is a virtual reality. Well, how is a virtual reality made? What's the information? Where does the information come from? How do you build up information? Well, we call it a digital virtual reality. Again, go watch the videos to find out, where that comes from. We're just kind of assuming that now, that it's a digital virtual reality, rather than deriving it on the YouTube Calgary videos. Information is pattern. Information is process. Information is sequence. You see, well, what is pattern, process, and sequence? Music, right? What is pattern, process, and sequence? Art. It's the visual arts, you might say, are pattern. By pattern, I just mean constructing something visually that has content, that means something, right? That's the pattern. I might give you the opposite of pattern is randomness. If there's no pattern, then you have just randomness. There's no information. So as things coalesce into some sort of pattern or structure, so when I mean pattern, I don't necessarily mean plaid or stripes. When I mean pattern, I mean it's structured bits, structured information such that it takes on content. It means something. Well, that's what an artist does. An artist, starts with pointillism, right? Or that's what a graphic artist, say, on a computer does. It's patterns of little dots, right? Pixels. And all those little pixels, have certain information, like a pointillist, put just lots of little dots of paint. But it's patterns of things. And in a computer, all those little dots and pixels are what? Ones and zeros. So they're patterns of ones and zeros. So however you define patterns, you have these patterns are information. So our reality is made up of patterns, process, and sequence. That patterns of patterns. Patterns can depend on other patterns. Given this pattern, then you can evolve that to a different pattern based on first pattern. Information flows, grows, it evolves. And this is the evolution of process. The process is called Evolution. Evolution is the process, okay? And consciousness, is the media. And information is the content that makes up our reality. So why do we respond to art and music? It's us. You see, we relate to that in a very personal, deep, and fundamental way. We, in this reality, our whole reality, our consciousness, our universe, our world, whatever we say, our entire reality frame is process, pattern, and sequences of patterns, like sequences of notes or sequences of brushstrokes. You see, it's all, so we relate to that in a very fundamental way. So we look at the way somebody throws paint on a canvas. Now, there are artists who, by the time they're done, it looks like a photograph. And then there are photographers, who fuzz up their pictures in Photoshop and makes it look like an artist. All of these are doing similar things. It's all just information, as are we, and we relate to it. So those squiggles, I once saw where a guy had this, I think it was like, I don't know, he had a chimpanzee or a monkey of some sort that he gave paint who splattered and threw things. And yeah. I've seen that on the, on a monitor someplace, and doing quite well, selling the art. Well, people might say, well, that's not art. There was somebody else who had like balloons full of paint and they shot them or did something to them to bust them and it threw the paint around, and that was art. Well, that is art. Art doesn't have to be hard to do as far as the technique goes. What art has to do is speak to people on an emotional level. So if you look at that canvas and it's just all these swirls and lines and stuff and it doesn't really look like anything, but you like it just the same, it says something to you because you look at all that, those swirls going every way and you say, yeah, that's my life. My life is like that. My life is just, swirling around, and here's a big red current going through there. I can kind of relate to that, that was such and such. But it's not that you one for one say, oh, that was my first job. When you look at that art, it just talks to you. You can see perhaps the turmoil, perhaps the balance, perhaps the uncertainty, or the endlessness of it, or whatever it is that appeals to you. You can see that in it, and that then you connect with that, because that visual pattern or that sonic pattern, that musical pattern, expresses something that is you. Some part of your experience, some part of your life is expressed by that. Okay, now, if you have somebody who makes very, let's say they paint with very stark, zigzag, sharp, everything's got sharp corners and so on, that's kind of the broken glass, sharpness approach, and that will appeal to somebody whose life is like that, somebody who lives in New York City, right, and leads a staccato life of busy and noise and that sort of thing. And you look at art that's different than that, that's maybe more, flowy and soft and muted tones and that kind of stuff, and that'll appeal to a different person. So we all get out of it. And the music, well, if a musician is connected to the larger reality, if that musician is using their mind, and it's not necessarily getting data from the database, but just seeing the big picture, not just this little picture of what's going on in their daily life, but they get a bigger picture, a better feel for things. They start to connect with the larger consciousness system. That then can inspire. They can get the kind of the music that suits that feeling, that connection. And when they take that and put it then to individual notes, to sequence and process and make music, other people listen to it, and it's relaxing. And it gives them a sense of a bigger picture. It gives them a sense of order and beauty that's non-definable. You see, so how the artist approaches their work has a lot to do with what you get out of it. So here's Albert Einstein listening to Mozart, and Mozart's a very airy, kind of beautiful, I don't know what you want to say, in the clouds. It's not bang, 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 or it's not the jackhammer thing. It's usually very sweet, and it's kind of a relaxing sort of music. And then you have the New Age musicians, right? Like the Halperins and those who, the bamboo flute and the gongs and whatever, and they try to produce this same thing in the same way. Well, they're just doing it with a different structure. Mozart did it with an orchestra. They're doing it with different kinds of sounds. A lot of them are electronic, perhaps, and created sounds. And it's the same thing, though. It's all art. And the point isn't how easy or hard was it to do, how many years of education did it take to be able to do it. The point is, how does it affect you? What do you get out of it? What does it say to you? Can you relate to it in a fundamental and personal way? And if you can, then that's good art for you. But we all don't relate to the same things. We all have different things that kind of touch us in that way. So art, in a way, is capturing us in a picture or a sound that we can relate to personally, not intellectually, but just at the being level. We connect with it at the being level. Now, people who try to connect with it at an intellectual level generally never get it. They're the ones who look at it and say, oh, I think I see a little bird in there, that sort of thing. Instead of just taking the whole thing and connecting with it, they're trying to intellectualize what the various pieces are, because to them it's not art if it doesn't have things in it that you can recognize. So it's a different approach. But you can get answers, you can get music, you can get solutions to problems, you can get, you can find your programming errors, you can get that scientific solution. You can solve that engineering problem. All these things are more available to you when you can open up to a larger space, to a larger view of things. Because in that larger view, and you're open to information, you can get information that kind of ties things together, because you can see things in a bigger picture, not with your intellect. This is outside your intellect for the most part. You get it in a sense of knowing.
So you're speaking of an altered state.
Yeah, it's an altered state, yes. And you may get in that altered state by listening to Mozart.
Yeah.
You see, that may help you, because Mozart was kind of in an altered state when he got the music, you see. So his music may help put you in that state. Or something else might, your meditation or a mandala or just whatever, just sitting in a quiet place. But you can get this information that's very useful to you in your personal life, with your relationships, with with your careers. If you can live in the larger reality, if you can even visit the larger reality, open yourself up to that, see the bigger picture, often things will make sense to you that just don't make sense if you're sitting here with your intellect grinding away at them, detail for detail for detail, because that's not where the solution is. The solution isn't in grinding these details that you know. The solution is backing off, getting a different paradigm, a bigger picture, looking from a larger view. Then suddenly all that stuff you're looking at in the detail kind of makes sense when it fits into the context of that bigger picture. And then when you get your aha moments, where you see that something fits. Aha, I see it. I see how that's connected now. Whereas as long as you stay intellectually engaged in the details, you can't see that big picture, because your focus now is focused on this gear and that lever and this thing and all these pieces. And it's the same with an artist. Most artists who are really good don't paint by the numbers. They're not saying, oh, a little dab of red here, a little dab of blue there. It's not like they're painting by the numbers. You can paint by the numbers and make a very pretty picture, but the picture lacks feeling. The picture lacks whatever it is that makes good art. It's just a very pretty picture. It looks like it was done by somebody that really knew what color to put in what place. And, a 12-year-old can buy a paints by the number thing and produce a painting that's way beyond their ability to just draw on their own. It makes you look like you're a good artist when you're not, because you can produce something that looks pretty good, paint by the numbers. But that's not what it's about, you see. It's not about using the intellect to do the details. We get lost in that. We get consumed by it. And we get frustrated with it. When most of the time, if you want to have a better relationship with your significant other, it isn't really about the details. It's about seeing the bigger picture. It's about seeing the context. Why is your significant other feeling the way they feel? From their viewpoint. Not how ridiculous their feeling is from your viewpoint, you see. That's you grinding away at the details. Won't get you anywhere. You got to get a bigger picture than that. Get out of just your own thing. So you have to see where their viewpoint is and why they feel that way. And then you have to realize it doesn't matter where their viewpoint comes from. It's their viewpoint. And you need to deal with it in a profitable way, no matter where it comes from. The fact that you think it's a ridiculous viewpoint is beside the point. It's important to them. And if they are important to you, then you deal with it. But see, you only see that from a bigger picture. As long as you're wrapped up in your own ego, then they're foolish and they just need to change. You see, that's the little picture view. That's you being foolish and you need to change. You see, when you think other people are foolish and need to change, that's a good sign that you're foolish and you need to change. So it all works the same way, whether it's art, whether it's improving your marriage or your life with your girlfriend or with your boss, or with your parents or with your wife's parents or whatever, it doesn't matter. The bigger picture gives you, and it's not so much information like we think of somebody talking to us and telling us what the secret is to really make that a good painting or a good song or a good sound, or what we should say to our significant other. Don't expect that kind of information. It's not that that you're dealing into Dear Abby and she's going to tell you, what to do. That's the wrong approach. That's the intellect now looking for a prescription about what to do. The problem isn't at the doing level. The problem's at the being level. And if you understand, or if you get to a point where you are being right, then the doing will just automatically work right. As far as the interaction, the plan, the music, whatever. The doing will come. How your hand moves to make the brush strokes. How you write down all those notes, and how you integrate the strings with the horns, and all the rest of that will just fall in. You have to do it at the being level. But if you start at the intellectual level and say, all right, I got a bunch of violinists and I got a bunch of horns, how am I going to make them do something? And it's all intellect. Well, you still might make something that's nice, just like you can paint with the numbers and make kind of a nice picture. But it won't have the art. It won't speak to people because it came out of here, didn't come out of here. You need the bigger picture with things. So it doesn't matter what your profession is, whether you're a counselor, whether you're a cook. Cooks are creative, right? Whether you're a cook, whether you're a homemaker, whether what you do is clean houses, makes no difference what you do. Whether you're a student, you can improve your life, you can improve your relationships, you can do better at whatever your job is if you're a whole person, not just a little left brain intellect, constantly spinning its wheels, running around in a little cage like those hamsters do, just running as fast as you can and never getting anywhere. That's the thing. So to grow up and live in the bigger picture, to see reality from a bigger viewpoint, so you understand why he or she says, feels, acts like that, rather than just saying, well, how do I feel about what they're doing? It's about me. You see, you can get that. Mozart can kind of get that pattern, that feeling. And then he's just expressing that in his notes. So his skill is that he can take that he hears, that he feels from that bigger picture, and he can translate that in a sequence. He can put that into pattern and sequence. Okay, but he gets it in one big chunk, one big picture. Whomp, that's it. He experiences it. He doesn't have somebody tell him, now put a note on this line, now put a note on that line. It's not coming through his intellect. He gets the experience. And then he can translate, because he's skilled at music, he can translate that experience into pattern and sequence and sound. And then when we listen, we get his experience, or our own interpretation of his experience, you see. And we say, wow, he was a genius. Whereas somebody else who just maybe works hard, but tries to do it out of their intellect, we say, well, they're pretty good on that piano or whatever, but the genius doesn't seem to be there, unless to you genius is how fast can they play. Then it's just all mechanical skill. And some people can wow you with their skills, but it's still not the same as something that grabs you at an emotional, deeper level.
I think all of this speaks in support of a subjective reality.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Because otherwise, if it was objective, and Mozart's music is an example of a high level, high art, everyone would love Mozart. So it's very...
And also you'd be able to take a computer and say, okay, computer, analyze Mozart. You see his style, you see how he uses his notes, you see how he changes things. All right, now write me something else in the same style. Well, they have done that with computers. And the computer will write it, and everybody listens to it and says, yeah, that's kind of nice. But nobody goes, oh, wow. Let me put the earphones on, that's really something. It's the same with painting. Computers can make some lovely art. Just some, we talk about the fractal art. You can make some beautiful art with computers. But it's generally doesn't get people, because what it is now they've taken somebody else's creative process and they've automated it. And it's okay, it's nice, but it generally doesn't have that, so it's not like, oh, such and such, this mainframe is a great artist, has exhibits all over the world in the best, museums and art galleries. It doesn't work like that, because it's neat, and it may be precise, and the technique may be immaculate because it's down at the at the pixel level of detail, but
it's coming from here. It's not coming from the other that you always speak about.
Yeah. So
tapping into
it's not the same thing. So there's another dimension, you see, to our reality. It's not just this objective reality where we do objective things. You see, that's why music and art are kind of interesting. I shouldn't say it's why they're interesting, but it's why in this discussion of reality they hold kind of a very interesting place. And that's because music and art obviously are not objective. Nobody pretends that they are objective. Everybody says, no, that's obviously a subjective thing. And yet music and art touches at a very deep place, not an irrelevant place. So if we live in this objective reality where the subjective is irrelevant, because the only thing that's relevant is this objective stuff and what you can plan, what you can count on, and it has to be logical, then we see that as kind of cold, hard, heartless facts. Nobody gets too excited about that, right? I mean, you need that, right? I mean, you need to know how to operate your car. That's objective, You can't just do anything or it won't work. But there's another component to us that is much more significant than all that objective stuff. Significant to us personally as individuals. And music and art are, two expressions of that. But we can take that same source, that is the source of great music and great art, and make that a source of great living for us individually. Affects our jobs, our relationships, what we do, our life, and then your life becomes a work of art. You see, your life becomes really a work of art because you're living it out of the being level. And if you live it out of the being level instead of that intellectual level, then your life is a work of art. And it is joy. And it is peace. And you do influence others because just of the way you are. As long as you're living your life out of your intellect and out of your ego, you're just like that artist who's painting by the numbers. It gets you by, but it isn't really important. It isn't really significant. It's not it's just there. It's going through the motions. It's shallow. So it's the same with your life. Make your life a piece of art. And the way you do that is like any art. You have to see a bigger picture, and you have to express that bigger picture in all your intents. And then you let the doing, the brushstroke, the how you transcribe the notes, you let all the doing of it just flow as an expression of the being level. Then you're a real, genuine conscious being expressing itself at the being level, and your life is an art, and other people will see you as art. You are just like art is to people. They relate to it. They get something from it. You become that to other people. They see you and they see your life, and they feel something different. They appreciate. They get something out of it. So you start to become a good example as well. But you then are the same thing to other people as art is. They're seeing a life that's an art form. And it's all about being, growing up and being at the being level. It's all about love. It's all about caring. It's all about other. And once you learn these things and learn how to live in a larger reality, then it just changes your entire existence. It's a metaphor I hadn't thought of before, but your life becomes a work of art. That's kind of a neat metaphor.
It is
isn't
nice.
But it does work that way. And so yes.